1944. A German Luftwaffe ace watched in disbelief as American P-47 Thunderbolts, planes he'd mocked as flying tractors, climbed vertically past 25,000 feet and chased him down like prey, doing things that should have been aerodynamically impossible. After being shot down and captured, he was sent to a POW camp in New York, where he discovered the terrifying secret hidden inside every Thunderbolt engine. A crude technology the Reich had dismissed as American fantasy. But what really broke him wasn't the technology itself. It was realizing that if America could mass-produce this without breaking a sweat, what else had Germany been lying to him about? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Spring came late to Germany in 1944, but it brought no relief to the men of Jagdgeschwader 27. At the airfield outside Kassel, the morning sky hung gray and heavy, thick with the smell of synthetic fuel and engine oil. Oberleutnant Hans-Dieter Kohl stood in front of his squadron in the briefing room, a cramped wooden building that shook every time a truck rumbled past outside. He was 24 years old, thin as a rail, with dark circles under his eyes that no amount of sleep could fix. 18 kills. 18 enemy aircraft shot down. The number meant something once. Now it just meant he had survived longer than most. The men around him looked worse. Some were 19, fresh from training schools that used to take 2 years, but now took 6 months. They flew because Germany needed pilots, not because they were ready. Kohl could see it in their faces, the way they held their hands too tight, the way they laughed too loud at jokes that were not funny. Fear wore many masks, but Kohl knew them all. His wingman, Lieutenant Werner Brandt, sat in the front row cleaning his goggles with a dirty rag. Werner was the closest thing Kohl had to a friend anymore. Most of the others were dead. Werner liked to joke, even when nothing was funny, especially when nothing was funny. He looked up at Kohl and grinned. "Tell me we get new planes today, Hans. Tell me Goering finally sent us something that does not fall apart in the air." Kohl did not smile back. There were no new planes. The Bf-109 G6 fighters parked outside were the same ones they had been flying for months. Patched, repaired, held together with whatever the mechanics could scrounge. Parts were impossible to find. Chrome for the engines, molybdenum for the steel, even paint. Some of the aircraft looked like quilts, panels of different colors riveted together wherever metal was available. The fuel they burned was synthesized from coal, dark and thick, leaving residue in the engines that made them cough and sputter at high altitude. "We fly what we have," Kohl said quietly. His voice carried no emotion anymore. Emotion was a luxury. "Today, we escort bombers to the Ruhr. The Americans will be there. They always are." Someone in the back muttered something about the Americans, the Army Thunderbolts. Everyone had an opinion about the P-47. It was big. It was heavy. It looked like a bathtub with wings. German pilots called it the Jug, short for juggernaut, and they said it with contempt. American planes were built like tractors, mass-produced garbage made by a country that did not understand real engineering. The P-47 couldn't turn. It couldn't climb. It just flew straight and soaked up bullets because it was too stupid to fall out of the sky. Werner laughed. "Let them come. They fly like freight trains. We are racehorses. We dive, we climb, we pick them off one by one." Kohl wanted to believe that. He used to believe that. But lately, something had changed. The Americans kept coming, more of them every day, and they were learning. The first time Kohl fought a Thunderbolt, it tried to turn with him. He killed it easily. The second time, it tried to climb. He killed that one too. But the third time, the Thunderbolt did not try to fight him at all. It just flew straight, kept its speed, and waited for him to make a mistake. When Kohl ran out of ammunition and tried to dive away, another Thunderbolt was waiting below. He barely escaped. The briefing ended. The pilots walked out into the cold morning air. Cole pulled on his leather jacket, worn soft from years of use, and walked toward his aircraft. The ground crew had painted a small scoreboard on the side of the fuselage. 18 white crosses, 18 kills. The paint was flaking off. He climbed into the cockpit. The sieve was hard. The instruments were cracked. The canopy did not seal properly, so wind whistled through at high altitude. He strapped himself in and started the engine. It coughed twice, belched black smoke, then settled into a rough idle. Not good, but good enough. They took off in pairs, climbing slowly into the overcast sky. Fuel was rationed. Every drop had to be saved. They couldn't afford to waste anything on unnecessary maneuvering. Cole watched his fuel gauge like a hawk. Half a tank, maybe an hour of flight time if he was careful. The bombers appeared below them, a ragged formation of U-88s heading west. Cole and his squadron took position above and behind, weaving back and forth to maintain speed. The minutes crawled by. His radio crackled with static and nervous chatter. Someone reported a contact, then another. Then the sky was full of them. The Americans came out of the clouds at 25,000 feet. Cole saw them before anyone else. 8 P-47 Thunderbolts in tight formation, their big radial engines glinting in the pale sunlight. They were high, too high. The Bf-109 struggled at that altitude. The thin air starved the engine. But Thunderbolts were heavy. They should struggle even more. Cole pushed his throttle forward and pulled back on the stick. His engine screamed. The altimeter needle climbed. 26,000 feet. 27. His vision narrowed at the edges. The engine began to cough. He looked up. The Thunderbolts were still above him, and they were not struggling. They were climbing. One of them rolled over and dove. Cole broke left, pulling hard. The Thunderbolt followed. Cole pulled harder, tighter, feeling the G-forces crush him into his seat. The Bf-109 could turn inside anything. The Thunderbolt should overshoot, but it did not. It stayed with him, and then it did something impossible. It pulled up into a vertical climb, following Cole straight up into the sky. Cole's engine quit, just stopped. The fuel pump couldn't keep up. His plane hung in the air for one terrible second, then fell sideways. He kicked the rudder, dove away, restarted the engine. His heart hammered in his chest. He looked back. The Thunderbolt was still climbing, still accelerating. How? Werner's voice came over the radio, sharp and afraid. "Hans, I cannot shake him. I cannot." Then static. Cole pulled out of the dive and searched the sky. He saw Werner's plane spinning down, trailing smoke. The Thunderbolt that killed him was already turning toward another target. Cole flew home alone. His hands shook on the stick. On the ground, mechanics swarmed over a wrecked P-47 that had crash-landed near the airfield. Cole walked over and stared at the engine. Something was mounted on the side. A tank. Pipes. He did not understand it, but he knew, somehow, that everything had just changed. The bullet punched through Cole's canopy on June 7th, 3 days after the Allied invasion of Normandy. He was over the French coast, tangled in a dogfight with 4 Thunderbolts, when tracers stitched across his left wing and his engine began to scream. Oil sprayed across the windscreen, hot and black. The stick went loose in his hands. The world tilted sideways, and he knew he was dead if he stayed in the aircraft. He pulled the canopy release, unbuckled his harness, and threw himself into the howling wind. The parachute opened with a jerk that felt like being punched in the chest. He floated down through scattered clouds, watching his Bf-109 spiral into a field below and explode in a ball of orange fire. American soldiers found him within an hour. They searched him, took his sidearm and his watch, and loaded him into the back of a truck. Nobody hit him, nobody yelled. One soldier offered him a cigarette. Cole took it with shaking hands. They kept him in a tent in France for 2 days, asking questions he did not answer. Then they put him on a transport plane to England. He had never flown in an American plane before. It was huge inside, cold, loud, and it smelled like diesel and canvas. They landed at an airfield somewhere in the English countryside, and he spent a week in a processing camp, eating thin soup and sleeping on a cot. Other German prisoners were there, pilots and soldiers and submariners, all of them quiet and watchful. Nobody knew what would happen next. Then they put him on a ship, a Liberty ship bound for America. The crossing took 11 days. Cole spent most of it below deck in a cargo hold converted into a holding area, surrounded by 200 other prisoners. The food was plain but regular, bread and soup twice a day. No beatings, no interrogations. Just boredom and the constant roll of the ocean. When they finally docked in New York Harbor, Cole caught a glimpse of the Statue of Liberty through a porthole. It looked smaller than he expected. They loaded the prisoners onto a train. Cole pressed his face against the window and watched America slide past. Factories, warehouses, towns with neat rows of houses. Cars everywhere, more cars than he had ever seen in his life. The train rolled north for hours, through farmland so green and vast it made his chest ache. In Germany, every field was scraped clean, every scrap of land planted with potatoes or wheat. Here, the fields stretched to the horizon, and some of them were empty, just grass growing wild. The POW camp was in upstate New York, surrounded by pine forests and low hills. It looked like a summer camp, not a prison. Rows of wooden barracks painted brown. A fence with barbed wire on top, but the wire looked almost decorative. Guard towers at the corners, but the guards looked bored. Cole and the other new arrivals were processed again, given uniforms with PW stenciled on the back and assigned to bunks. The first meal broke something inside him. They served it in a dining hall with long tables and benches. Boiled potatoes, sausages, green beans, white bread with butter. Real butter, not the gray margarine he remembered from home. Cole sat with his plate and stared at it. He ate slowly, waiting for someone to take it away, but nobody did. After dinner, a guard walked by carrying a clipboard and whistling. Cole asked another prisoner in German, "Is this normal?" The man, a U-boat sailor who had been there for 6 months, just laughed. "Wait until Sunday, they give us ice cream." Cole thought it was a joke. It was not a joke. On Sunday, they served vanilla ice cream in small bowls after lunch. Cole held the cold bowl in his hands and felt his throat tighten. His mother had not seen butter in 2 years. His brother was eating sawdust bread. And here, in an enemy prison camp, he was eating ice cream. 2 weeks later, they assigned him to a work detail. Cole expected mines or road construction, breaking rocks in the sun. Instead, they put him on a truck with 15 other prisoners and drove them to a factory 20 miles away. Republic Aviation. The sign on the gate was huge, white letters on blue. The factory building was the size of a cathedral, all steel and glass, gleaming in the morning light. Inside, the noise was overwhelming. Machinery clanging, conveyor belts humming, welding torches crackling. Cole was assigned to a cleaning crew. His job was to sweep floors and move crates from one side of the factory to the other. Mindless work, but he had eyes, and he watched. The assembly line stretched the length of the building. Aircraft engines moved along it, one after another, workers swarming over them like ants. Cole counted 12 engines in various stages of completion just in the section he could see. 12. In one day, he saw 3 engines completed, tested, and loaded onto trucks. 3 engines. In Germany, a factory might produce 3 engines in a week if they had the parts. The workers were not all men. Some were women, wearing coveralls and bandanas, operating lathes and drill presses with practiced ease. In Germany, women worked in factories too, but only because all the men were dead or at the front. Here, it seemed normal, expected. The women chatted and laughed while they worked. One of them smiled at Cole as he swept past. He looked away, confused. The foreman was an older man, with a limp and a thick accent. He spoke a little German, learned from his grandparents. He saw Cole staring at the assembly line and walked over. "You a pilot?" he asked. Cole nodded. "You fly against these?" The foreman pointed at an engine on a test stand. The massive radial engine roared to life, 18 cylinders firing in sequence, shaking the floor. "Yes," Cole said quietly. The foreman studied him for a moment, then gestured to the engine. "Come here, I show you something." Cole followed. Up close, the Pratt Whitney R-2800 was a monster. 2,800 cubic inches of displacement, 2,000 horsepower. But what caught his eye was a small tank mounted on the side, connected by pipes to the fuel system. He had seen something like it on the wrecked Thunderbolt back in Germany, but he had not understood it then. "Water injection," the foreman said. "We pump water and methanol into the engine during takeoff and combat. Cools the cylinders. Lets us push the boost way past normal limits. 5 minutes of extra power. Enough to climb, enough to chase, enough to win." Cole stared at the tank. It was so simple, so crude. Water. Just water and methanol. The Luftwaffe engineers had talked about systems like this, but they dismissed them as unreliable, inelegant, not worth the trouble. But here it was, mass-produced, standard equipment. "How many engines you make?" Cole asked. The foreman shrugged. "This plant? Maybe 100 a week. There are other plants, lots of other plants." 100 a week? Cole did the math in his head. 100 engines a week meant 400 a month, 5,000 a year. From one factory. His knees felt weak. That night, lying on his bunk, Cole could not sleep. He kept thinking about the assembly line, the women at the lathes, the engines rolling out one after another. The casual way the foreman said, "lots of other plants." In Germany, they were rationing fuel and cannibalizing wrecked aircraft for parts. Here, they were building engines faster than they could bolt them into airframes. The war was not a contest. It was a mismatch so vast that it defied comprehension. November came, Cole that year, and with it came a day the Americans called Thanksgiving. Cole had been in the camp for 5 months. 5 months of regular meals and warm barracks, and work details that felt more like routine than punishment. He had learned some English, enough to understand the guards when they joked with each other, enough to read the signs posted around the camp. He kept his head down and did his work, and tried not to think too much about the factory, about the engines, about the numbers that did not make sense. But on Thanksgiving morning, something changed. The kitchen staff worked differently, busier, more focused. Trucks arrived with crates of food. The smell coming from the dining hall was rich and strange, nothing like the usual boiled vegetables and bread. At noon, the guards called everyone to lunch. Cole walked in with the others and stopped dead. The tables were covered with food. Not prison food, not rations. Real food. The kind he had not seen since before the war. There were whole turkeys, golden brown and steaming, their skin crispy and glistening with fat. Mountains of mashed potatoes with butter melting on top. Bowls of dark gravy. Green beans. Dinner rolls so soft they seemed to glow. Cranberry sauce, bright red and sweet. And at the end of the table, pies. Pumpkin pies with whipped cream. Cole stood in line with his plate, numb. A server placed a thick slice of turkey on his plate, then a scoop of potatoes, then beans, then a roll. The plate was so full he had to hold it with both hands. He sat down at a table and stared at the food. Around him, other prisoners were eating, some quickly, some slowly, some with tears running down their faces. Nobody spoke. Cole picked up his fork. The turkey was tender, juicy, flavored with herbs he could not name. The potatoes were smooth and buttery. The roll was warm. He ate slowly, each bite a small violence against his understanding of the world. In Germany, his mother was eating turnips and black bread, if she was lucky. His younger brother, conscripted into the Volkssturm at 16, was probably hungry right now, cold in some trench on the Eastern Front. And here, in a prison camp, Cole was eating like a king. He set down his fork. His hands were shaking. Something inside him cracked, a dam holding back a flood. And suddenly, he could not stop the thoughts that came pouring through. This was not a trick. This was not a special occasion. This was just Thursday in America. They fed their prisoners better than Germany fed its soldiers. They gave ice cream to enemy pilots while German children went hungry. What kind of country could do that? What kind of power did that represent? After the meal, Cole walked outside into the cold November air. He needed to move, to think, to make sense of what he was feeling. The camp library was open. He had been there before, flipping through old magazines, practicing his English. Today he went to the newspapers. They were weeks old, shipped up from New York, but they still carried news. He read about aircraft production numbers. 300,000 planes built since the war started. 50,000 tanks. Liberty ships constructed in 45 days from keel to launch. The numbers were so large they seemed fake, propaganda, but he remembered the factory. He remembered the assembly line. He knew the numbers were real. He found an article about the invasion of Europe. It included a photograph of the beaches at Normandy, packed with ships and vehicles and supplies stacked higher than buildings. Another photograph showed a train yard in Kansas, hundreds of rail cars loaded with tanks and trucks and artillery stretching to the horizon. Cole stared at that photograph for a long time. Germany had been fighting this. Germany had thought it could win. He thought about the speeches he had heard. Goering promising that no enemy bomber would ever reach Berlin. Goebbels talking about wonder weapons that would turn the tide. The Führer himself declaring that German will and German technology would triumph over the mongrel Americans who knew nothing of real war. Cole had believed it all. He had flown into battle believing that his skill and his courage and his superior aircraft would be enough. But skill did not matter when the enemy could replace every plane you shot down with 10 more. Courage did not matter when the enemy could outproduce you 100 to 1. The Thunderbolt had not won because it was elegant. It had won because there were thousands of them. The water injection system was not a miracle. It was just American pragmatism, a simple solution to a complex problem, mass-produced and installed on every aircraft without hesitation. Germany would have spent 2 years arguing about whether water injection was theoretically sound. America just built it and moved on. That night, Cole sat on his bunk with a small notebook he had traded for. He wrote in German, the words coming fast, almost without thought. We called them crude. We mocked their assembly line mentality, their mass production, their lack of artistry. We said they built planes like tractors, without soul, without understanding. But they built an air force in the time it took us to file a requisition form. They built a war machine so vast that our entire country could not match a single factory. I flew a Bf-109 held together with salvaged parts and coal-based fuel. They flew Thunderbolts with systems I did not know existed, supported by a supply chain I cannot comprehend. We thought the war would be won by aces and willpower. They won it with factories and ice cream trucks. He stopped writing and stared at the page. The truth was simple and terrible. Germany had never been fighting a war. Germany had been fighting an economy so powerful that it could feed its enemies better than Germany fed its own people, an economy that could produce, transport, and deploy machines of war faster than Germany could count them. Ideology meant nothing against that. Propaganda meant nothing. Skill and courage and sacrifice meant nothing when the other side had so much more of everything that it did not matter. Cole closed the notebook and lay back on his bunk. Above him, the ceiling was clean and unbroken. The barracks were heated. Outside, guards patrolled in warm coats, drinking coffee from thermoses. In Germany, soldiers froze in the snow. In Germany, cities burned. In Germany, his mother waited for a son who might never come home. The war was not over yet, but it had been over for a long time. Germany just hadn't known it. Or maybe Germany had known and kept fighting anyway, kept sending boys into the sky to die, kept lying to itself about wonder weapons and final victories. Cole understood now. The Thunderbolt had awakened him, not with its weapons or its speed, but with what it represented. Power was not about who had the best pilot or the best plane. Power was about who could build 10,000 planes and not even notice the cost. America had that power. Germany never did, and that made all the difference. The train rattled into Hamburg on a gray morning in March of 1946. Cole pressed his face against the dirty window and watched his city appear through the mist. Except it was not his city anymore. It was a graveyard. Entire blocks were gone, replaced by fields of rubble and twisted metal. Buildings stood like broken teeth, their walls blown out, their roofs collapsed. The train station was half destroyed, its grand arched ceiling open to the sky. When the train stopped, Cole climbed down onto a platform covered in dust and ash. The air smelled like wet concrete and old fire. He carried almost nothing: a small canvas bag with 2 shirts, a pair of pants, and his notebook. In his pocket, he had 3 copies of Life magazine that he had smuggled out of the camp, folded and creased from reading. The American guards had not cared. They had waved him through with barely a glance, eager to process the long line of returning prisoners and get back to their own lives. Cole had shaken hands with one of the guards, a farm boy from Iowa who had once shared his lunch. The guard had wished him luck. Cole had not known what to say. Now he walked through the ruins of Hamburg, following streets he remembered from childhood. Most of the landmarks were gone. The church where his family went on Sundays was a pile of stone. The school where he learned to read was a burnt shell. He walked for an hour, picking his way over broken bricks and shattered glass, until he found the neighborhood where he grew up. His family's apartment building was still standing, barely. The top 2 floors were gone, but the bottom 3 remained. He climbed the stairs, his footsteps echoing in the empty stairwell. His mother answered the door. She was thin, so thin that her clothes hung on her like rags. Her hair had gone completely gray. She stared at him for a long moment, her eyes wide, and then she pulled him inside and held him and wept. Cole stood stiff in her arms, unable to cry, unable to speak. The apartment was cold. There was no heat. The furniture was gone, sold or burned for warmth. 2 rooms remained, bare and dark. His mother had survived on rations and charity, working in a clothing factory that paid in potatoes. She told him about his brother. Werner had died in January of 1945 during the defense of Berlin. 17 years old. No body, no grave. Just a letter from the army saying he was missing and presumed dead. His mother showed Cole the letter. The paper was cheap, the type smudged. Cole folded it carefully and handed it back. He did not know what to say. There were no words for this. That night, they shared a meal of thin soup and dark bread. His mother apologized for the food. Cole ate in silence, remembering turkey and mashed potatoes, remembering ice cream on Sunday afternoons. He did not tell her about the camp. He did not tell her about the factory or the assembly lines or the casual abundance of the enemy. What good would it do? She had lost one son to the war. The other had come home, but he was different now, hollowed out, carrying knowledge that felt like a weight on his chest. He tried to tell her once. A week after his return, they were sitting in the small kitchen, drinking ersatz coffee made from roasted grain. Cole said, "Mother, in America, the prisoners ate better than we did before the war." She looked at him with tired eyes and said nothing. He tried again. They have factories that produce hundreds of engines every week, hundreds, from a single factory. She nodded slowly, but he could see she did not understand. Or maybe she understood but did not care. The war was over. Her sons were dead or broken. What did it matter how many engines America could build? Cole stopped trying to explain. Instead, he looked for work. Jobs were scarce, but his training as a pilot meant he understood machines. He found a position at a small engineering firm that was helping to rebuild the city's infrastructure. The work was simple. He drew plans for water pipes and electrical lines. He inspected damaged buildings to see if they could be saved. He worked long hours for little pay, and at night he returned to the cold apartment and sat with his mother in silence. But he kept the notebook, and he kept reading it. The words he had written in the camp felt more true now than they had then. Germany had not lost because of cowardice or betrayal. Germany had lost because it never had a chance. The enemy was not just an army. The enemy was a system, an economy, a way of organizing people and resources that Germany could not match. The Thunderbolt was just a symbol. The real weapon was the country that could build 10,000 Thunderbolts and still have resources left over to feed its prisoners and give them ice cream. Years passed. Cole continued to work. He became a senior engineer. He taught younger men who had not fought in the war, who did not remember the propaganda, who wanted only to build things and move forward. He told them about the water injection system. He told them about the factory in New York. He told them that innovation was not about pride or ideology. It was about solving problems. It was about being willing to try something new, even if it seemed crude or inelegant, even if it offended your sense of how things should be done. One of his students asked him once, "Did we lose because we were not smart enough?" Cole shook his head. "We lost because we thought being smart was enough. We thought our technology was superior because it was complex and beautiful. But the Americans understood something we did not. The best technology is the technology you can build quickly, cheaply, and in vast numbers. 1,000 simple planes will always beat 100 perfect ones." In 1983, when Cole was 63 years old, he attended an air show outside Munich. His wife had died 2 years before. His children were grown, scattered across Germany, building their own lives. He went to the air show alone, walking slowly, leaning on a cane. There were old warbirds on display, restored and polished, relics from a war that felt like ancient history. And then he heard it, the deep, unmistakable roar of a radial engine. He looked up. A P-47 Thunderbolt climbed into the blue sky, its silver skin gleaming in the sunlight. The sound shook the ground, a sound he had heard in his nightmares for 40 years. But now, watching it climb and roll and dive, he felt no fear, only a strange kind of peace. The Thunderbolt had taught him the hardest lesson of all. Respect your enemy's strengths, not your own delusions. Understand that wars are not won by heroes or aces or wonder weapons. They are won by factories and supply chains and systems that keep the planes flying long after the speeches are forgotten. The Thunderbolt completed its routine and landed, taxiing back toward the crowd. Cole stood and watched it roll past. The pilot waved from the cockpit. Cole raised his hand and waved back. Germany had never expected water injection to awaken the Thunderbolt. But it was not the water injection that defeated them. It was the fact that America could install it on 10,000 aircraft without breaking a sweat. They lost the war before Cole ever climbed into a cockpit. They just did not know it yet. And by the time they learned, it was far too late. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.